March 17th, 1943, somewhere over the Ruhr Valley, Germany. A formation of B-17 flying fortresses sliced through a pale morning sky, their silver fuselages glinting like knives in the sun. Below, the ground trembled with the roar of anti-aircraft fire, each tracer round exploding against the clouds like fireworks in a nightmare. Enemy fighters streaked through the air with deadly precision, their Messerschmitt 109 seconds weaving in and out, seeking any weak spot in the lumbering American bombers. In the lead aircraft, pilot Captain James "Jim" McAllister felt the familiar thrum of the engines beneath his feet, a reassuring vibration that had become second nature after hundreds of hours in the sky. Then the first shot struck a cannon shell ripping through the left wing, tearing metal and sending shards of aluminum and insulation into the fuselage. Smoke began to curl through the cockpit, a bitter, acrid taste filling the cabin. The navigator shouted over the intercom that the port engine was out, its gauges flickering violently before settling into a painful silence. The bombardier reported holes in the bomb bay floor, the cargo racks twisted like tinfoil. Yet the B-17 refused to fall. Despite the damage, despite the flames licking the wing, the aircraft seemed to fight back. The rudder remained responsive. The ailerons still held the plane steady. The nose gunner swung his twin, .50 calibers toward an approaching fighter, and opened fire, tracer rounds cutting a line of red through the smoky sky. From the outside, observers might have assumed this battered machine was moments from disintegration. But from inside, the crew felt a strange, almost supernatural confidence. Each man knew instinctively the plane would hold. Across the formation, other B-17 seconds were taking hits, some losing engines, others sporting jagged holes from flak, yet they pressed forward as a unit, each plane compensating for the others, adjusting their formation to maintain mutual protection. The Germans, used to seeing bombers falter and fall after one or two hits, were beginning to notice a pattern that defied every doctrine in their books. Here was an American bomber that could take punishment, shrug off enemy fire, and continue its mission, all while returning its crew home alive. By the end of the mission, 7 B-17 seconds had returned to England with fuselages perforated by hundreds of rounds, landing gear mangled, control surfaces barely intact. Casualty reports were grim, yet the plane itself, despite its wounds, was intact. It was not luck, it was engineering, combined with human courage. And in that moment, the legend of the Flying Fortress was born, a machine that could refuse to fall, even when the odds were stacked against it. The story of the B-17 begins not in the skies over Europe, but in the design rooms of Boeing aircraft in Seattle, Washington, in the mid-1930s. The Army Air Corps, anticipating a future of strategic bombing far behind enemy lines, demanded a bomber that could carry heavy payloads at high altitudes while defending itself without the constant presence of fighter escort. Boeing engineers faced a challenge: how to make a four-engine bomber both formidable and survivable. The solution was radical for its time. The B-17 incorporated multiple defensive turrets, ensuring every angle of attack was covered. By the time production began in 1938, the standard Flying Fortress boasted 8 .50 caliber Browning machine guns, placed in nose, tail, dorsal, and ventral positions. Each gunner could cover blind spots, creating a defensive web around the aircraft. Yet armament alone was insufficient. Engineers focused equally on survivability. The fuselage was strengthened with heavy-duty frames and braces. Fuel tanks were self-sealing, designed to prevent catastrophic fires even after sustaining hits. Redundant flight controls allowed a plane to be flown even if some systems failed. The B-17 was built for punishment. An aircraft could lose an engine or two and still maintain altitude. A wing could be perforated by cannon fire and yet remain structurally sound. The cockpit was armored, providing crucial protection for the pilot and co-pilot. In essence, the B-17 was not just a bomber, it was a flying fortress, a concept that combined offense, defense, and resilience into a single machine. Yet not everyone embraced the idea immediately. Pilots who had flown earlier bombers, often no more robust than canvas and wood, doubted that any aircraft could survive heavy flak, fighter attacks, and the brutal temperatures at 25,000 feet. Engineers argued that it was precisely these features, armored, cockpit, self-sealing tanks, multiple engines, that made the Flying Fortress revolutionary. They weren't merely building an airplane. They were creating a new paradigm in aerial warfare, one in which aircraft could endure, adapt, and complete their mission, even under near-apocalyptic conditions. Boeing's testing regime proved the point. During high-altitude flight trials, prototype B-17 seconds sustained hits from practice shells and continued flying without catastrophic failure. Redundant systems were put through extreme simulations, control surfaces disconnected, engines shut down, landing gear compromised. Time and again, the aircraft returned to the ground intact. These tests were more than engineering exercises. They were early proofs of the Flying Fortress's legendary reputation that would soon astonish friend and foe alike. When the first B-17 seconds reached operational squadrons in 1941, the legend had only begun. Crews quickly learned that these aircraft were more than machines. They were partners, able to absorb punishment that would have downed earlier bombers, giving the men inside a fighting chance to survive where previous generations of airmen had fallen. And as the United States entered the war, the B-17 would prove time and again that resilience, planning, and superior engineering could turn even a simple aircraft into a force that defied expectation. August 17, 1942. A squadron of B-17 seconds from the 97th Bomb Group lifted off from their base in England, bound for the Ruhr Valley, the industrial heart of Germany. The mission was straightforward in theory: strike at the factories supplying the German war machine. In practice, it was a journey into hell. From the moment they crossed the English Channel, the bombers were met with resistance. Flak batteries concealed in valleys and behind hills exploded with deafening force, sending iron fragments slicing through air and metal. Messerschmitt 109 seconds and Focke-Wulf 190 seconds streaked past like dark streaks of death, firing at every bomber in sight. Crews gripped their controls, fingers white around throttles and joysticks, while gunners shouted coordinates and warnings over the intercom. Yet something remarkable happened. Despite severe hits to engines, tail assemblies, and fuselages, the B-17 seconds pressed on. One aircraft, piloted by Lieutenant Harold Benson, took multiple flak hits that shredded the right wing and ignited a small fire near the bomb bay. Smoke choked the cabin, instruments flickered, and oxygen lines ruptured. Still, Benson's aircraft maintained altitude. The co-pilot, Sergeant Mike Reynolds, leaned over to stabilize the plane's controls, while the navigator kept the formation on course. Against all odds, the bomber released its payload over the target before limping home, barely keeping one engine running. When crews returned to base, mechanics counted nearly 400 holes in Benson's fuselage alone. Yet the aircraft had not only survived, it had completed the mission. Word spread quickly across the squadrons. These planes could endure punishment that would have grounded any other bomber. Reports from German anti-aircraft units confirmed the shock. Commanders were puzzled, unable to comprehend how the Americans were willing to fly such heavy, defensively armed aircraft straight into flak-laden skies and survive. The Flying Fortress was no longer an experimental design. It was a proving ground for a new type of warfare, where resilience and redundancy mattered as much as firepower. Crews began to develop an almost superstitious trust in their machines. They knew the B-17 could absorb punishment, keep flying, and bring them home. Every mission reinforced a simple truth: the aircraft was built to survive, and in doing so, it changed the expectations of aerial combat forever. The question that haunted many military engineers and strategists was simple: how could a bomber endure such punishment? The answer lay in meticulous design and an almost obsessive attention to detail. The B-17's frame was constructed from heavy-gauge aluminum, reinforced at critical stress points. Engineers anticipated damage not just from small arms fire, but from high-velocity anti-aircraft shells, designing the wings, fuselage, and tail to maintain structural integrity even when perforated. Fuel tanks were self-sealing, surrounded by protective foam layers to prevent catastrophic fires, a feature that saved countless crews when incendiary rounds tore through the wings. Engines were mounted with redundancy in mind. Losing one would not compromise, lift, or control, and the aircraft could still maintain altitude on the remaining 3, or even 2, engines in extreme cases. But it wasn't just brute strength. The B-17's control systems were dual redundant, allowing pilots to operate ailerons, elevators, and rudders, even if primary hydraulics failed. Every system had backups. Every instrument had a fail-safe. In the cockpit, armored plating shielded the pilots and co-pilot, while the bombardier and navigator were similarly protected. For gunners, overlapping fields of fire meant that no enemy fighter could approach without exposing itself to at least one 50 caliber machine gun. The psychological impact on crews was equally important. Men who trusted their aircraft to survive under fire fought differently than those in fragile bombers. Confidence bred aggression, precision, and cohesion. Crews began referring to their B-17 seconds by name, often with nicknames reflecting toughness or stubbornness. It was not sentimentality, it was recognition that the aircraft was a partner in survival. By late 1942, intelligence reports from the Luftwaffe began noting a disturbing pattern. German pilots reported that American bombers would absorb attacks that should have been fatal, continuing missions despite catastrophic damage. It is as if the planes are alive, one Luftwaffe officer noted in his report after an engagement over Bremen. Even when riddled with fire and shrapnel, they do not fall. This realization began to reshape how the Germans approached American air operations, though it would take months and many more missions for them to fully comprehend the implications of a bomber that refused to die. By the spring of 1943, the 8th Air Force had ramped up bombing missions deep into the heart of Germany. Targets now included industrial complexes in Hamburg, aircraft factories in Leipzig, and oil refineries near Ploiest. Each mission was longer, more dangerous, and carried heavier payloads. Crews knew that flak concentrations were denser, Luftwaffe interceptors more aggressive, and the weather often unforgiving. On April 17, 1943, a formation of B-17 seconds from the 306th Bomb Group crossed the North Sea into German skies. Within minutes, flak exploded along their path, sending shrapnel slicing through wings and fuselage. Engine alarms sounded, smoke filled the rear compartments, and the sheer force of anti-aircraft fire threw some planes out of formation. Yet the flying fortresses pressed forward, navigating through a gauntlet of fire with precision that left German observers dumbfounded. Lieutenant James "Jim" O'Connor's bomber, the Iron Maiden, took a direct hit to its left engine. Flames licked the wingtip, and the hydraulic system controlling the flaps failed. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but O'Connor and his co-pilot stabilized the aircraft, manually adjusting control surfaces, while gunners returned fire at incoming Focke-Wulfs. Over the target, they released their bombs with deadly accuracy, then limped back across enemy territory with only 2 functioning engines. Stories like these became almost routine. Observers on the ground, both German and Allied, began noting a phenomenon. B-17 seconds were surviving hits that would have destroyed earlier bomber models. Crumpled fuselages, shredded rudders, and engine fires did not necessarily mean the end. Every mission reinforced the perception that the Flying Fortress was not merely a bomber, it was a flying bastion, built to endure, to press on, and to bring crews home against impossible odds. The psychological toll on German fighters grew. Intercepting B-17 formations became a gamble, with increasingly unpredictable results. For every aircraft they downed, another seemed to shrug off damage that should have been fatal. Luftwaffe intelligence reports described American bombers as stubbornly resilient, and pilots admitted a growing sense of frustration and disbelief. The B-17's resilience extended beyond its structural design. Equally crucial was the coordination among its crew. A partnership forged under fire. Each bomber carried a standard complement of 10 men: pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, radio operator, and gunners covering multiple angles. Success required every man to perform flawlessly, often under the most extreme conditions. In the chaos of combat, communication was paramount. The B-17's intercom system allowed the pilot and co-pilot to direct gunners, while the navigator called out evasive maneuvers and the bombardier prepared the payload for release. When the aircraft sustained damage, responsibilities often shifted instantly. A tail gunner might help a wounded radio operator. A co-pilot could manage damaged engine controls, while the pilot concentrated on keeping the plane aloft. One mission over Frankfurt in May 1943 illustrated this perfectly. The lead bomber, Liberty Bell, lost 2 engines to flak and suffered a shattered rudder. The pilot, Lieutenant Carl Simmons, handed partial control to the co-pilot, while the navigator recalculated the return route. The gunners engaged fighters that swooped in from both sides, while the bombardier continued coordinating the bomb release. Every crew member adapted in real time, their actions synchronized by trust, training, and necessity. This cohesion created a force multiplier. While individual aircraft were formidable, the combined precision and coordination of a formation magnified their impact. German pilots noted the difference immediately. It wasn't just the durability of the planes. It was the teamwork of the crews that made the B-17 seconds nearly unstoppable. Observers recorded that even heavily damaged planes would remain in formation, delivering ordnance accurately before limping back to base. For American crews, this sense of brotherhood became a lifeline. The B-17's reputation for survival, coupled with the trust in one's crewmates, imbued a psychological resilience that often proved as critical as the aircraft itself. When a plane was hit, men fought not just for survival but for the comrades at their side, each knowing that the flying fortress was more than steel and engines. It was a flying citadel that carried them through hell and back. By the summer of 1943, the skies over Europe had become a crucible. The Luftwaffe was relentless, concentrating fighters and flak batteries around strategic targets. Yet, the B-17 crews of the 8th Air Force continued to press the offensive, undeterred by staggering losses. Missions over cities like Bremen, Hamburg, and Berlin were becoming legendary not just for destruction inflicted, but for sheer survival. On a mission to Bremen in August, a formation of 20 B-17 seconds faced one of the heaviest concentrations of anti-aircraft fire seen up to that point. Flak bursts erupted all around, tearing wings and puncturing fuselages. One bomber, the Sacred Cow, took a direct hit to its starboard wing. Shrapnel ripped through the fuel tanks, and smoke poured into the cabin. Yet Lieutenant Frank Reynolds kept the plane in formation, with his co-pilot adjusting the remaining engines and gunners repelling attacking Messerschmitts. The crew delivered their bombs accurately and began the perilous journey home. This mission, like many others, underscored the B-17's remarkable survivability. Pilots and crews described moments when they believed the aircraft would simply fall from the sky, yet it held together. Bomb bays jammed, hydraulic systems failed, and engines caught fire. But the aircraft's redundant systems and rugged design kept it flying. Observers on the ground, including German anti-aircraft officers, recorded astonishment. Planes riddled with flak were still completing missions, returning fire, and navigating through dense defensive networks. For the German airmen, it was a new kind of frustration. They were trained to destroy bombers with coordinated attacks, yet the flying fortress seemed to shrug off punishment, and crews adapted with unmatched discipline. Luftwaffe reports began noting a recurring phenomenon. B-17 crews would survive attacks that should have been fatal, often because the aircraft itself allowed them to fight back while limping towards safety. By late 1944, The B-17 had cemented its place in history, not only as a bomber, but as a symbol of resilience and innovation. Its reputation spread far beyond airfields and briefing rooms. Stories circulated among soldiers, airmen, and civilians alike. Tales of heavily damaged planes limping home, crews surviving near impossible odds, and formations that refused to break under fire. In missions over Germany, Italy, and France, the Flying Fortress consistently proved that survivability was as critical as firepower. Aircraft that should have been lost returned with their crews intact, often bringing vital intelligence, photographs, and payloads. Engineers and military planners studied these outcomes, recognizing that the combination of rugged design, redundant systems, and crew coordination had created an aircraft capable of changing the dynamics of strategic bombing. The psychological impact on both sides was profound. American crews drew confidence from their aircraft's resilience, which bolstered morale and combat effectiveness. German airmen and commanders, meanwhile, grew increasingly frustrated with a foe that could absorb punishment and continue operating with lethal efficiency. Reports often described the B-17 as stubborn, unyielding, and virtually indestructible, cementing its nickname, the Flying Fortress. By the end of the war, the B-17 had flown tens of thousands of missions and delivered unparalleled strategic impact. Its legacy extended beyond its combat record. The aircraft became a template for durability, crew coordination, and tactical flexibility, influencing bomber design and air combat doctrine for decades. The Flying Fortress was not merely a plane, it was a network of men, machinery, and ingenuity that collectively refused to fall. In the annals of aviation history, the B-17 stands as a testament to the principle that resilience, teamwork, and design excellence often outweigh numerical or technological superiority. Against overwhelming odds, through flak, fighters, and fire, it demonstrated a fundamental truth. The legend of the Flying Fortress endures, reminding the world that even in the most punishing environments, courage, coordination, and engineering can defy expectations and keep men and machines flying, no matter how fierce the storm.